Are tubeless road tires worth the hassle? Let's talk about it. So, for road bikes, for road tires, should you go with a tubeless setup like these Wabi Pro 1 30mm tubeless tires? Or should you go with something like this, the Continental Grand Prix regular clincher tube setup with an orange tube in there? Let's talk about it. So here we have a 2021 Giant TCR. It has hookless rims that you can only use with tubeless ready tires like the Wabi Pro 1 or the Continental Grand Prix 5000 STR tubeless ready tires. So what are some of the benefits of running a road racing tire in a tubeless setup? Well, the first main benefit I could think of is you can run a delicate road racing tire like the Wabi Pro 1 and not really get any punctures. Yes, you can still get punctures, but 99% of the time, it's going to seal it up and you're going to be able to keep rolling. I've gotten punctured with this bike before. I've had to pull over and take the pump off that I have mounted on it, and I've had to actually inflate the tire a bit, but I've never had to take the tire off, or I've never had to take the wheel off and put an inner tube in there. I still ride with 2 inner tubes on this bike all the time just in case. I don't ever want to get stranded. However, if you want to run a road racing tire and you don't want to have to worry about riding through glass, riding through some sort of a nails in a construction zone, and it's going to give you a flat tire and you're going to be on the side of the road putting a new tube in, this is where road tubeless really shines, and that's the main benefit in my experience of road tubeless. You can run soft, fast, delicate race tires, but you get all the benefits of a tire like the Continental Gator Skin, for example, that can never puncture, right? Because if these do puncture, most of the times it's going to seal it up. Now, a couple more benefits of the road racing tubeless setup is they're actually faster, there's less rolling resistance. That inner tube does create some rolling resistance. I'm not sure how it actually does. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a mathematician, but I've heard that it does, and there's data out there on bicyclerollingresistance.com pointing that it does. So it actually is faster if you don't run inner tubes as opposed to if you do run inner tubes. And you can also run them at a lower pressure. So I typically run these at around 60 psi, but I want to start playing with them and running them at 55 or 50 psi just because they are a bit bigger than most people would run. Some people are still on 25mm tires. I think most of us that are out road riding are on a 28mm tire. Some of us are even up to a 32mm tire. These are right in between those two last ones. These are 30mm tires, so the wider the tire, the lower you can go. But since there's no tube in there, you could actually go a bit lower than normal just because you won't get a pinch flat. However, I wouldn't go too low because if you start bottoming out, you're going to damage your carbon wheels, which this bike has carbon wheels, but you could even damage aluminum wheels as well. So those are the 3 main benefits of road tubeless. You're not going to get as many flats at all. You're pretty much virtually unpuncturable, or I shouldn't say unpuncturable, but it's going to be a self-sealing puncture. It's going to be faster and it's going to be more supple because you're going to be able to run a lower pressure. I wouldn't go too low, but you can take the pressure that you were running in your tube tires and drop it about 10 psi and see how you like it. It also helps because some road racing bikes aren't as compliant as maybe, let's say, like a Trek Domani or a full steel bike like the Wabis, but the lower tire pressure actually does help smooth out some of those rough bumps in the road. So road tubeless, what's not to love? Well, there are a couple of things not to love. There are 3 main things: the setup time, the long-term maintenance, and the compatibility if you're running a hookless rim. So let's talk about the setup time. This bike actually came tubeless when I bought it 2 years ago. It came with some giant 25mm racing tires, so everything was all set up, ready to go. I then learned that I couldn't put on the Gator Skins, or I couldn't put just any tire on there because this is a hookless rim. So I did find the Wabi Pro 1, I really like them, but to get them to seat and to get them to make sure the fluid is in there, it is definitely frustrating if you've never done it before. And because you don't do it as often, I do it maybe like once a year, if that, I have to relearn how to actually do it and how to actually set them up every single time. Now that sealant does get messy, but I usually do it in my kitchen. Make sure you do it not on a carpeted floor like this. Don't do it over a carpet because it's going to be a nightmare to clean. The tubeless sealant, it does wipe away pretty easily, and worst case, it just dries and then you can just wipe it up super easy. The main issue with setting them up on the road tubeless system is getting the tires to actually seat in the rim. YouTube has a lot of videos about people saying this is how you set up tubeless tires. That's how you should do it. This is how you should do it. I had an air pump that you'd actually pump up and you'd actually have a chamber in there and you can turn it and then all of a sudden it would just go. That stopped working. It was very frustrating, and to the point where when I did it last winter before I was getting this bike set up for this past summer, I actually considered putting a Tubelito inner tube in here and just being done with tubeless. Then I found the AirShot, which actually I really enjoy. A couple of other people on YouTube have talked about this. This is not a sponsored video. I just really like this product. You basically pump up this with like 100 PSI, and then you connect this and you turn this valve, and then it just gives a whole bunch of air into there. Every time I've used this, the tire has seated. I haven't had any issues with that, but that's the biggest issue that I've found with setting up tubeless tires. Once you can get that down, it's not a big deal, but that is very frustrating. Now, long-term maintenance. If you don't ride your tubeless tire rims a lot, the tubeless sealant can actually pool in the bottom of the rim, and then you're actually going to be having dry sealant in there, and now when you do get a puncture, it's not going to seal. You're going to have to put a tube in there anyway. Every 2 or 3 months, you do need to check your sealant level and make sure it hasn't dried out. Now, the interesting thing about this is, since I store these bikes inside, I don't store them in a garage. I used to, but I don't store them in the garage anymore. I actually left this bike for like 6 to 8 months without riding it because it was wintertime, and the sealant did not dry. So it might have something to do with if it's super cold and you're leaving it sit in the garage, it might dry, it might harden on the bottom, and then you're going to have to take that tire off, clean it out, put in new sealant, and go through the hassle of seating them. But if you got the AirShot, which by the way, this will be linked in the description, it might make the job a bit easier. So that's the second con, the long-term maintenance. The third con, and this was more of a con 2 years ago, back in 2020, 2021, when I first bought this bike, is the compatibility of the hookless rims. Now, I read about hookless rims. I think structurally it makes sense because you have the rim sitting like this, right? The hooked rim actually has 2 hooks on the side so the tire can grab onto it. But structurally, if you hit a bump and you bottom out, it can actually be damaged a little bit easier. So the hookless rims actually just sits like that. It's a lot stronger, or so I think it looks a lot stronger from a structural standpoint. But that means that 2 years ago when I bought this bike, or we're coming up on 3 years now, there wasn't a lot of tires. It was pretty much just the Wabi Pro 1s and Giant's own Cadex branded, Giants branded tires. I really had some issues with compatibility. But now this hasn't been an issue because Continental came out with their GP5000 STR that are compatible with hookless, and we do have Wabi Pro 1s and other Wabi tires and other hookless ready, tubeless ready tires that can be used with a hookless rim on the market. So it's not as much of an issue right now. But I remember, I think I paid over $100 each for these setups of tires, but now you can get them for $60. And again, I'll link these Wabi Pro 1. I'll link them down in the description on Amazon. They're about $70 or $80 depending on the size, depending on the time you look at them. So this is an issue. It would be nice to be able to ride some of the cheaper training tires like the Continental Gator Skin, which you can get a set of Gator Skins for $50 or for $100, $50 a tire, slap them on and you're good to go, and they're going to last forever. Sure, not going to be as fast, but it's going to be easier from a maintenance standpoint. So the compatibility issue is still there, but it's just disappearing a lot more. And in my experience, once you know how to set them up and once you know how to do all this stuff, and that AirShot that I showed you before definitely helps. It's definitely worth it to set up the tubeless tires on your bike, because now I wouldn't hesitate to ride these at night or if it's cold, as long as I know the sealant is good, because I don't have to change to a rougher riding tire like the Gator Skin. I can keep my nice luxurious race tires and not have to be worried about punctures. So is there any space in the market for your tires that aren't tubeless? Of course there is. Like I mentioned before, these Continental GP5000 tires, hold on, I gotta sneeze. False alarm, I didn't have to sneeze. These Continental GP5000 tires, I can get a set of them for a little over $100. So they're a lot cheaper, and they've always been a lot cheaper. There's also the Grand Prix 4 Season and the Gator Skin. Pretty much you can get a set of non-tubeless, just traditional road tires that you need to use a tube in. You can get a set of them for about $100 on Amazon nowadays. I'll link some examples in the description and some of my favorite ones in the description. So it is nice you get that same performance at a much cheaper price. And yes, For these are in 28 millimeters. I don't run less than 75. I'd probably push it to 70, but I wouldn't want to run anything lower than that. Whereas with the tubeless version, the tubeless tires over here on this bike, I actually could run down to 50 PSI, maybe even push it to 45 PSI, depending on how it feels. So it just comes down to the simplicity of the tube setup. I also upgraded to the Tubeless inner tubes. I really like the Tubeless inner tubes. Knock on wood, I have not gotten any punctures on them yet. However, one of the downsides of the tubed tires is if you want a super fast, luxurious, great riding road race tire like these GP5000s, you're going to have to sacrifice puncture resistance, and you're probably going to be more prone to punctures if you ride through glass because there's no sealant in there helping you. And you could put sealant in the tube. I personally wouldn't do that because I would just either pick one or the other. If it's cold out and I don't want to get any punctures, I would just run a gator skin. If it's summertime and I'm actually riding a lot and I want that luxurious feel, I just pack a couple of the extra Tubelitos. It's pretty simple to change a puncture, and the lack of maintenance on the inside of your apartment, on the bench I should say, actually does make up for it. I have never gotten a flat with these race tires and the orange Tubeless inner tubes. I have not ridden them that much, but the issue is peace of mind. Because we're getting into November, we're going into the tail end of fall, almost winter in a few weeks, I actually am going to put some gator skins on this bike, just because if it's 40 degrees or lower, I don't want to be dealing with getting a puncture. I'd rather just ride gator skins, and it's going to be super windy, it's not good riding conditions anyway, so the gator skins work. But that's also a pro of the tube tires. You can change out the tires a lot easier. And you don't have to, you can leave them sit for like months on a spare set of wheels, and you don't have to worry about them. So here are my Wabi lightweight wheels, the wheels that came on the Wabi Classic, and I've actually got a set of Panaracer Gravel Kings. I did a video with these. These blow up to about 30 millimeters. I had to put some air in them, but I can just air them up and I'm good. But if I want to change and put these tires on these rims, I can do that. If I want to take tires and change them around, it's just a lot easier to do that. Whereas with this bike, with a tubeless system, I have to make sure that I retain that sealant. It's just a lot harder to change the tires around like this. So if you want to be able to change your tires a lot more, maybe in the summertime you're riding road race tires, in the wintertime you're riding a tougher tire like the gator skin, or you want to step up to a gravel tire that has more puncture resistance, that way you can ride some light gravel on your road bike. This is a pro for the traditional tube setup because you don't have to do as much preparation and as much maintenance as you would with the tubeless tire version. And also, like I mentioned, I've had to spin these wheels about once a week just because otherwise I don't want the sealant to pool in the bottom. So which is better, the tubeless version or the tubed version? Well, I think it really depends on what you're doing. If you've got one or two bikes that you ride a lot, right? I think that that's the bike you should make tubeless if you can. And it depends. If you've got good luck with the race tires and the orange Tubeless inner tubes, don't go tubeless. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be dealing with all that other sealant and all that stuff. You don't have to worry about it if you're not getting a lot of punctures. If you're finding you're getting a lot of punctures on the race tires with the tubed version, then I would say start thinking about converting to that tubeless version if you want to be able to ride that luxurious race tire and not have to worry about being on the side of the road every once a week or so, replacing a flat tire, replacing a tube. If you've got multiple different bikes, if you've got a road bike, you've got a gravel bike, you got a single speed, if you've got more than one set of wheels that has a tubeless setup, that's where things can start to get a bit overcomplicated in my experience, because now you got to be watching two levels of sealant, and you got to make sure, okay, I want to switch to my gravel wheels today, I want to switch to these wheels, that wheels, oh, but did I have sealant in them? Oh, did I? In my experience, in my opinion, that is not worth it. If you've got one bike that you ride a lot, you should keep it tubeless. But if you have 2 or 3 different wheel sets, just in my experience, it's not worth having the extra faff and the extra work of maintaining fluid levels. Just keep them tubed. It's going to be fine. And a lot of times with gravel, people like to go tubeless with gravel because you can run lower pressures. And yeah, that is actually a good thing for tubeless. You can run lower pressures, but if you go with a wider tire, you can go with lower pressure anyway. So another pro of the tubeless setup is with this giant TCR, I can only go up to a 32 millimeter tire, but if I go tubeless, I may be able to get down to a 45 PSI, where if I stayed with a tubed 32 millimeter tire, I'd probably only be able to go down to about 55 PSI, because then you're risking some pinch flats. But with an actual gravel bike, if you can go up to 40 millimeter tires or 43 millimeter tires, you're going to be able to make up for that difference, and you're going to be able to actually get the same ride quality, the same supple, cushy feel of the softer tire. So if this bike did not come set up tubeless, I don't know if I would put the tubeless setup in there. I'd probably just stick some TPU inner tubes like the orange Tubelitos. I've been having good luck with them so far. I'd probably just see how it went. And if you're riding race tires in the summertime and you got tubes, if you're not puncturing a lot, not really a big deal, no reason to go tubeless. But if you want that peace of mind, if you're riding maybe in New York City, for example, and there's a lot of glass, a lot of construction zones, and you want that peace of mind of being able to ride a race tire and not have to worry about fixing punctures all the time, this is where road tubeless can really start to shine. So I hope this helped. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. Remember to comment and consider subscribing if you like the content that I'm putting out here. And as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!